So look at the game that they're playing here. First, it's, oh, you're a hypocrite for not insulating your home. And then when he points out that it's actually too expensive to do this, their response is, oh, you're too poor to insulate your home, you peasant.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Over the past few weeks, there's been numerous protests in Britain by a group called Insulate Britain, which is a climate activist group that emerged from the Extinction Rebellion group that was quite famous and infamous a couple of years ago. And, well, their tactics are very similar, very high profile, high disruption incidents, blocking motorways, things like that. And for that reason, the British media has not been very kind to them, to put it nicely. Now, before I show a segment in which they interview their main spokesperson, I just want to say, personally, this is not the type of protest that I would do. I think we can be creative, we can find ways. I'm 100% in favor of disruptive protests. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But I think ones in which motorways or any other kind of high-use transport is disruptive is often counterproductive to their aims. I think a lot of people tend to empathize more with the people whose commutes have been disrupted or who have suffered some other major incident as a result of this disruption. And basically the case that will be made here is one in which a woman suffered a stroke as a result of these protests. So I can't say this is the type of protest that I would do if I was in that situation. But having said that, again, I am 100% in favor of disruptive protest, and I think a lot of the arguments given against them are arguments that are echoed in other less disruptive protests. So, for example, there's always the argument that any kind of protest where there is violence or vandalism or any kind of property damage is bad, and we should just have peaceful protests. But then when people undertake peaceful protests, like, I don't know, taking a knee to protest against racism, then even those are tarnished in some ways. The excuse that this is not the way to protest will be given regardless of how the protest is actually undertaken. So this is ultimately a very dishonest argument. And what we will see in this debate is incredible dishonesty in the criticism of this group. So let's watch. And I should add, this is Good Morning Britain, a really awful morning show. This was for the Americans watching this was the show where Piers Morgan basically worked until quite recently, when he quit in protest over some comments that he made about Meghan Markle, or he was made to quit. I don't know the story really, but yeah, that was Piers Morgan's other show. And I just want to say, when you are a co-host to someone like Piers Morgan, whose colossal twattery and just sheer obnoxiousness is larger than life, you kind of escape the radar of your own awfulness. And his co-host, Susanna Reid, is also fucking awful. And we will see it in this interview, as long as the other people on this panel. So, without further ado, let's watch this.
Almost 40 arrests have been made after climate protesters blocked both carriageways of the M25 this week during rush hour traffic.
Surrey police have issued the statement. Protesters have put their own lives at risk as well as those of others. But the plans to impose an injunction could also affect peaceful protesters.
Joining us now Liam Norton from Insulate Britain, we met him last week, says there's just no other option than to take this sort of action. And journalist Dawn Neeson, who thinks risking the lives of other people is never acceptable.
So the first thing I'm going to say is this debate obviously has a kind of establishment versus critics of the establishment vibe to it, because obviously the presenters will be they won't discuss climate at all, as you will see, and they will make it only about the disruption caused by the protests. So nothing about the nature of the protest itself will be discussed. But as is always the case in Britain, there is a class dimension here, and the treatment that Liam Norton, the spokesperson of this group, gets is incredibly tainted with class privilege. As you will see by the way he is dressed and by his accent, he is clearly working class or middle class at best. And you are surrounded by presenters who have a long career in journalism. They are probably pretty damn well off. And I'm saying this so you can just take the class aspect into consideration, because in Britain, class is so much more apparent than in the US, because it's manifested in so many different ways than in the US, or rather many additional ways than in the US. Accent being the classic one. So let's just watch this.
No matter what the cause. So welcome back, Liam.
Hi, thank you.
Let's just have a look at those pictures of what happened around this time yesterday, because I'm all in favour of peaceful protest, but this is terrifying.
See, there we go. I'm in favor of protest, just not that way. But there is never a way. If the protests were entirely peaceful, either A, no one would listen to them, they would not be in the news, he would not be invited on that show, or B, they would find something else. A patriotic angle, as they always do with, for example, taking the knee. So there's never a way.
You're talking about the M25 and vulnerable human beings walking in front of cars which could at any stage just knock you over. I don't understand how this helps your cause.
And that's because, Susanna, and you're an intelligent journalist, right?
Yeah.
And you haven't understood what I said last week about what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity.
No, I understand it. I'm asking about those pictures. How is that helping your cause?
If you understood it, you might start to understand that a little bit more.
Liam, just try not to be so patronising when you're talking to me. Okay, I understand.
No, it's not about patronising.
No,
it's
is.
the truth.
Sorry, your tone is patronising.
It's the truth.
I'm asking specifically about...
If you want to see patronizing, just watch the whole thing, and you will see which side is really the patronizing one.
How you're helping your cause. Because I have to say, and you might not have heard the programme earlier, I'm extremely worried about what is now happening as a result of that protest, because I consider that there is potential overreach when it comes to seeking an injunction in this case. But I wonder whether what's happened is slightly backfired on you, because now the Home Secretary is going to get an injunction. You could have raised attention of this issue without putting all of these lives at risk. I mean, look at the traffic there. Are you not scared that one of your group might be killed doing this? Yeah.
Well, they're doing it voluntarily. So it's a strange argument that, she seems to be implying that he's forcing the other members of Insulate Britain to potentially suffer an accident, maybe get run over. That is a very strange argument. And that is also very incredibly patronizing. It's like, I know more about the safety of your people than you do. This is all voluntary. Those people know the risks. They know what they're doing. Also, when she brings up the potential for... So, as it happened, the British government did end up suggesting, I don't know if they've passed it, but they have considered toughening sentences against people who have been against protesters who are more disruptive. So, she's kind of blaming him for, look, because of your actions, now we are one step closer to tyranny. An authoritarian government in which people can't protest because of you. Not because we have a fucking government that hates any form of protest. No, that has nothing to do with it, according to Susanna Reid. It's this guy's fault. It's literally like, oh, see, Germans, it's your fault that you created Hitler. This is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a price worth paying?
Well, the thing is, Susanna, this is the other truth, okay, is that your worry doesn't change climate change, doesn't affect what we do in terms of climate change. Worry doesn't do anything. And people have been worried for 30 years. People have been writing letters for 30 years. People have been sending in petitions for 30 years.
So it's worth risking the lives of your protesters,
There she goes again. He's making a very good point, and I think he should have hammered this point more throughout the interview. But what he's basically saying is like all the ways, the democratic instruments that we have in society to enact change that benefits all of us don't work, because you can file all the petitions that you want, you can make all the peaceful protests that you want, you can vote for whoever politician you want, and none of that matters because no one in government takes any action in favor of climate. So this is a very good point. And what he's basically saying is that the democratic process does not work. And that's true. Because if it did work, we have known for a long time that we are in a climate emergency. We know that we have very little time to change things. We know that every year that passes, we need an even greater effort to not reach the point of no return. And governments still don't do it. So how does she expect anyone to make a difference unless they go outside the bounds of the democratic process and take action somehow that is beyond that, potentially disruptive, indeed. But she's more worried that one of them could get injured or killed. This is ridiculous, like ridiculous line of argument.
You would be prepared to lose your life over this. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what we're saying is we're in this awful position, aren't we? Where nobody is doing enough in terms of trying to save the next generation from destruction.
Okay, so you would
that's what
be
we're looking
prepared
at.
to lose your life
And we understand.
in order to raise awareness of this issue.
Well,
And
people
let's
are
just
going to
establish-
lose their lives,
and
Susanna.
Okay, so
so
the
that's
answer
where
is
we're at.
yes.
Well, people are going to lose their lives if nothing's
And
done.
when we consider what that means, that is a motorist on the M25 hitting somebody.
It's terrible, isn't it?
But that's a price you think is worth paying, to not only for a life to be lost.
So poor motorist that ran over a Insulate Britain protester. Think of him. Let's not do anything about climate because we need to think of him or her. This is insane. This is insane. Like, how on earth can she get away with making that absolutely piss poor argument?
But for the impact that would have on a driver trying to go about their normal business. I mean, imagine the impact of that.
Well, the government have had weeks to give us a meaningful statement that they're going to act in terms of what it is that we're asking for. And Insulating Britain will give the best value for money in terms of reducing emissions, hundreds of thousands of jobs, and it's going to stop tens of thousands of our elderly from dying each winter.
Well, actually,
Susanna,
what the government's doing, as we know, the Home Secretary is now going to court to seek an injunction in order to put people who are prepared to die for this cause
So it's a
behind
really-
bars, to keep them off the motorways, so that isn't on the conscience of any motorist who is involved. Dawn.
So again, now it's his fault that the government is just going to become more tyrannical. This is unbelievable. This is crazy. Why is there no criticism of the government responding to this? Not by, hey, why don't we sit down and negotiate and maybe we can, I don't know, meet halfway, see some solution to this, make some space for funding for insulating homes. No. The response of the government is, we're going to fuck these people up. We're going to send them to jail. That's what we're going to do. And Susanna Reid clearly thinks that is his fault. Jesus Christ. Like I said at the beginning, Piers Morgan got all the shit on Good Morning Britain for being an obnoxious twat. But Susanna Reid is fucking awful. Fucking awful as well.
Well, as you listen to that, what do you think?
To be honest, I'm absolutely appalled, and I thought you were very patronising there, Liam. why haven't you insulated your own home for a start? Because I think where you're coming from is pure hypocrisy as well.
Sorry, is that the case? Is your home not insulated, Liam?
Susanna, whether my
Just answer the question, Liam. It's not, is it? We know it's not. And
whether
Boris Roger Hammond,
whether my home is insulated or not doesn't change the fact that millions of people's homes aren't insulated.
Hang on a
and they're
moment.
not
Sorry,
going to be.
is this the case? You're saying you would risk your life for Insulate Britain, but you're not going to insulate your own home?
Susanna.
Okay, wait for this. Wait for this.
No, the thing is.
Sorry if I
okay,
sound patronising, but that sounds
No,
like you're
that's
completely
not patronising,
sabotaging
that's
your
a
cause.
simple-
The thing is,
straightforward
this is
question.
like a shame that this discussion has been debased in this way, because what we're talking about is the future of of our country.
Yes.
Our country is going to be destroyed
doesn't
if
that
we
start
don't
at
get
home?
in. If we don't get this sorted
Doesn't
out.
that start at home?
Well, you know, insulation costs thousands, tens of thousands of pounds. You're aware of that?
OK, so you're...
So, just how much does insulation cost in Britain? Good question. A cavity wall, 450 to 500 pounds. Solid wall internal, 5,500 pounds to 8,500 pounds. Solid wall external, 9,400 pounds to 13,000 pounds. Loft, 3,000. Floor, 500. Did I say 3,000? I meant 300. Floor, 530. Please tell me, in Britain, who on earth who is working class can afford this? Or even middle class. And by middle class, I mean like what most people refer to as middle class, not what Brits refer to as middle class, because Brits use the word middle class in a rather condescending way to refer to upper middle class, like urban upper middle class. But I mean just a standard, average income person in Britain. This is a huge amount of money. A huge amount of money. And how do they expect, this guy clearly is not working for Goldman Sachs. That I can guarantee you. So
You're saying you can't afford to insulate your home.
No, what I'm saying is millions of people
So you
in the
can,
country.
if it's not.
Millions of people in the country.
So look at the game that they're playing here. First, it's, oh, you're a hypocrite for not insulating your home. And then when he points out that it's actually too expensive to do this, their response is, oh, you're too poor to insulate your home, you peasant. This is insane. This is absolutely, like, you can't win. That's the position that they want to put him in. It's like, you can't win. Whatever fucking argument, we're going to shame and ridicule you.
Cannot afford to do it. That's why millions of our people
So
are
you're
in...
not insulating your home as a protest?
Do you think
against...
it's acceptable for...
What, how does she reach that conclusion? He literally just said, this is too expensive. Oh, you're doing it out of protest. Holy crap. Holy crap. Yeah, this is garbage television. Garbage fucking television.
Millions of the people in our country to be living in fuel poverty, tens of thousands of them to be dying in their homes, freezing to death. Do you think that's acceptable?
I can't understand why you
just
wouldn't
come in
start
for a
with
second
insulating your own home.
Whether that's true or not, do
He
you...
literally just said it's really fucking expensive. What I would have done here is been like, hey, what's your salary? What do you get from this show? And just like shame her online. And like, oh, how much money you make. And then he said, this is what I make. Please tell me how I'm going to save to insulate my home. I mean, I think he does make some good points at times. I think he should have been a bit more prepared. Obviously, you don't know beforehand what questions you're going to be asked. But yeah, this is just awful. And he's in a fucking, he's in a dragon's den right here. Because all of them are super right-wing. So before I get to the guy who's going to jump in at this point, this is Don Neeson, an English journalist, editor of the Daily Star newspaper. Don is a regular guest on talk radio. So this is like a fucking far-right anti-woke YouTube show, which has like far-right nutters like Darren Grimes all the time. So this is as right-wing as you get in British media. Like this even makes the Daily Mail look centrist. Yeah. Neeson is also a regular guest on GB News, which also is way more right-wing than anything on television in Britain. In fact, I made a video of it a couple of weeks ago. That is the kind of person that is on this show, on this panel. And I remind, like, if this was a debate just between him and Dawn, that'd be fine. But they're also defending her. They're on the same side. It's 1 against 3. And there's always a, like, no matter how good your arguments are, no matter if you were like hitting home runs with every argument that's thrown your way, there is still an element of optics for people, especially the dumb motherfuckers who watch this, who are incapable of really reasoning through the arguments. And I would say that that's the majority of people who watch trash television like this. There is an aspect of optics that no matter how well you do in a debate, if it's 3 against 1, you will always be on the defensive. You will always be the one who's being attacked. And that looks better on them than it does on you. So again, if this had just been a one-on-one with Dawn, that would have been, I think, fair. But it's 3 of them piling against 1.
I think that's acceptable
But it
because
is
that's
true,
what's
Liam.
going on.
Right. Liam, can I just come in here now? This time last week when you came on, I put a couple of things to you. I read you the dictionary definition of fascism.
Yeah.
And it absolutely describes what your supporters are doing on the most.
Okay, so there was a previous video where he appeared. I'm going to put the link in the description. I obviously don't want to show all the videos for time reasons, but he basically gave a definition of fascism, a very selective definition of fascism that no first semester political science student would possibly accept as the definition of fascism, basically accusing him of basically being a fascist, taking fascist actions. And this is relevant for what's going to come in a minute or two. But it was, this is this is the famous everyone I dislike is Hitler argument. And remember that I said that they're all right-wing? Well, this is Richard Madeley. Let's look at his politics. Madeley has expressed strong support for former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, yada, yada, yada. He supported the Iraq War, saying international law on the issue was, quote, incredibly complicated. He has been described as a neocon, Blair's self-appointed apologist, and Blair's yapping Pekingese. During the Labour Party leadership elections of 2015, Madeley condemned Jeremy Corbyn, referring to him as a freeloading anarchist. In an interview in 2006, Madeley named Cuban leader Fidel Castro as the person he most despises. Remind me of the time that Fidel Castro undertook a war based on lies and false premises that essentially destroyed a country in the Middle East. That's the kind of shithead that we're dealing with here.
Ways. It is the act of a fascist regime to impose the will and the determination to impose some kind of global solution on the individual without...
What the hell is that definition? Like I said, what kind of definition of fascism is that? Impose a global solution to individuals? Governments do this all the time. By his own definition, every single action that a government takes that was not approved by like a national plebiscite or referendum must be fascism, because it was, a communal interest was imposed over the will of individuals. Like, what the hell? What about a draft? Is a draft fascist? In World War I and II, all the British men who were drafted into service, that may have been, I'm sure that a lot of them probably wouldn't have wanted to be drafted. So was that fascism as well? Putting the societal needs of fighting a war versus the individual desire of, I don't want to be killed in a trench in Flanders or Normandy. You can't have it both ways, dude. You just can't.
Consulting the individual and to dictate that to them. So I would say to you again that you are behaving like a fascist. I also predicted that we would be seeing serious consequences in the queues behind the blockages. And you told me that I was being hypothetical and you didn't accept it. Well, a couple of days later, a woman suffered a stroke sitting in a car in solid traffic with her son at her side. He was driving at a hospital because the stroke had started at home. She couldn't get to the hospital. She was in the car for 6 hours. She's now paralysed. That is you cannot argue that that is not a direct result of your protests. How can you possibly justify putting a woman in hospital who cannot speak and not move because she couldn't get to hospital in time because of what you were doing? What would you say to the son if he was
So that is, I mean, I have to admit that is the reason why I don't think these protests are probably the ideal ones to gain public sympathy. Because if an incident like this happens, like your entire appeal to a significant amount of people just goes down the drain. Like that is the worst nightmare that you can have as in terms of choosing this kind of protest, which is why I think they should be doing other types of disruptive protests. And there are many ways that you can do it without impairing the possibility of an incident like this happening.
standing in front of you right now?
Well, we've tried to get in touch with LBC to speak to Chris.
I don't care. What would you say to the Sun?
They've not had any correspondence with him
What
since.
would you say to the Sun?
We obviously feel terrible, and I would apologise and say how bad I felt, and he'd probably tell me to F off, you know, and I accept that. So, but it doesn't change the position that we're in terms of the climate and the position that we're
You don't lose
left.
any sleep about that. You don't lose any sleep about the fact that there is an elderly woman who is only in hospital.
Does he lose any sleep over all the people who died in Iraq that he supported? That's also why if you go to the media and do your research on the people who are there, and know where you can hit them if they use an argument. Like if he had known what his record on the Iraq war was, this would have been a great moment. It's like, you did not care at all about the thousands of Iraqi lives for a war that you supported. So don't give me this spiel that you suddenly care about a woman getting a stroke in a car because of me. That would have been the best counter argument.
Paralysed because of what you've been doing. You don't lose any sleep about that.
Yeah.
Well, why are you still doing it then? Because it might happen right now.
Because
if
you're
your
not...
guys are on the M25 as we speak, there could be somebody else suffering a heart attack or a stroke or some other fatal incident which wouldn't be happening if you weren't blocking the roads.
Richard.
It's going to happen again.
Richard, it's like we're on repeat. Because you're not listening to what I'm saying about the future of this country.
And you're not accepting responsibility for your actions. This is a classic
Can I just finish? Can I just finish, Richard?
Well, because if you say something that's stupid, I'll cut you
Richard,
off. So go on.
Yeah, I'm trying to... So in terms of... You're not listening to what I'm saying in terms of...
You notice like the way in which they're engaging with him. It's so, like I said, it's far more patronizing the way that they are behaving towards him as a working class person, that anything that he said at the beginning, which he did make some comments of, you're intelligent, you should know this, which I don't think that's how you should open a debate, or you should say at any point. But it is so condescending. This is the elites looking down at the peasant and saying, how dare you?
The future of our country is at stake, so I said that. But then the first thing on the fascism...
and I agree with you.
But the fascism...
I actually agree with you that we should be insulating our homes. I think you're right. But I think the government should be helping
Okay, so
people
on the
like
fascism...
Really, so what are you doing to lobby the government, Richard? What are you, if you so agree with it, I can agree to a lot of things, but then what am I actually, how many segments are there? You can search on Google, how many segments are there of Richard Madeley passionately defending the insulation of British homes? Good luck finding a single video. He never has mentioned it. I don't watch the show on a regular basis, but I can guarantee you he has never, ever touched this subject.
To pay for insulation.
Richard,
the way that you're pushing the argument is fatal. Has fatal consequences.
Okay, let me finish. Let me answer that question. So, in 1937, do you know how many ministers, how many MPs supported Churchill when he was trying to fight?
You've just got your fingers in your ass, haven't you? You just cannot hear.
Do you know how many MPs?
He got him on this one. He totally got him on this one. This is coping. This is total cope.
He supported Churchill
in
1937.
I don't care. I don't want to answer an uncomfortable question, which is actually a great analogy of why we're doing what we're doing, or at least whether whether we're right. I think he's trying to make the moral point of like, we're right. I know that you disagree with our tactics, but we're right. We will be proved in the end, which is true. But yeah, reply to that with, I don't care.
I'm not interested in Churchill.
6 MPs.
I'm interested in
6
people who can't
MPs
get to
supported
hospital
him.
because of what you're
and
doing.
Churchill was right, wasn't he? But he only had the support of 6
You're
MPs.
comparing yourself to Winston Churchill.
No, I'm putting yourself in...
Dude, you literally just called him Hitler. Well, not literally, but you literally just said you're a fascist. You undertake fascist tactics. So he's allowed to use the World War II reference, the I call you Hitler or I call you fascist argument. But then when he uses an analogy that is certainly more apt, that's invalid. You can't compare yourself. You can't compare yourself to Winston Churchill. How dare you? But I can call you Hitler all the time. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Into a historical situation that not always, the public are always with you, but you're still right. And we're right now. This is about what's right and what is wrong.
That is the most
and we're
twisted
talking
parallel
about
I
the
think I've ever
future
heard in a
of our
debate.
country. We're talking about the destruction of our economy.
Okay.
And we're talking about the destruction of our health service. And you keep talking to me about hypothetical situations
It's
and you're
not
refusing to
hypothetical.
listen
People
about what I have to say about the future of this
That was
country.
not a hypothetical stroke.
We're
okay?
right.
The accident,
We're right,
the
okay?
pile-up that took place behind your
Richard,
demonstrators 4 days ago.
Richard,
which
we're
resulted
right.
in a
We've
woman
been
being
writing
airlifted to
letters for
hospital
30 years.
was not a hypothetical accident. It happened. These aren't hypothetical points.
We've been
They're
writing
facts.
letters for 30 years. We've been writing petitions for 30 years. We've been pleading with our government for 30
And now you're
years.
risking people's
And
lives.
what we're saying to the government is this. This is our line in the sand. We are demanding that the government make a meaningful statement to save the future of this country.
And if
they refuse to do
you'll
it,
kill
then
people.
they can put us in prison. And that's the
No,
Home
if they
Secretary's
refuse to
decision.
do it, you'll
And
kill
I've had
people.
enough of talking to people in this
I'm just doing
country
a Piers Morgan.
about what we're doing.
You're doing a
This is the state of things.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
So, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen watching this programme, we now know that these protesters are actually following in the footsteps of Winston Churchill. That is the level of intellectual debate that they're able to bring to the table. They actually compare themselves to the stand that Winston Churchill took against Hitler. That's their parallel. What do we make of that kind of intellectual vapidity?
Well, I think that just demonstrates where this particular group of people are. And I take what you said about fascism, but I also would add that they are actually on a par with terrorism.
So they're fascists and they're terrorists.
And whenever I had this debate with anyone from that movement and they say, we are like the suffragettes were, well, the suffragettes did admit back in the day that they were terrorists. So they are literally admitting they are terrorism.
So that's great. You admit that all the rights that you have as a woman in a democratic liberal society were achieved by terrorists. But then she's far right, so I don't think she cares much about those rights. See, this is my issue with liberalism. This is why I'm not a liberal. It is because liberalism is an ideology that promises you, that you will live free, prosperous lives in a democratic society. But then every single social change that is necessary to bring you that good life, you must fucking fight for it and die for it. Because nothing good ever came without struggle under liberalism. Workers' rights, female rights, minority rights, whatever you want. None of it came for free. And I wish we could live in a system where you didn't have to fight the powers that be just to lead a decent life with dignity. That's why I fucking hate liberalism.
And, I've covered enough road traffic accidents and car crashes, and I've been to tell families that they've lost loved ones in car crashes. And you know what? Seeing them walk out on the M25 the other day brought back so many horrific memories. And if you were in a car with your family and you had an accident and caused a pile-up and you lost a child or you killed with them, as you said to somebody, you've got to live with that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Imagine supporting a war where a drone strike could kill an entire family, but you're in favor of that. And now you have these crocodile tears over a road accident. Give me a fucking break.
This is not helping the cause.
Well,
we all agree we need to do
We
something.
might be getting this emergency injunction today, which means that if they go back, having been arrested and told that they can't go back, they break the injunction, they go to jail. They properly go to jail.
You know what,
support
Richard?
that?
I would actually send them to China, let them go and glue themselves to Tiananmen Square and see how far they get.
OK.
Do you want to thank
Yay, fascism.
you very much indeed? Liam, thanks very much indeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the face of British, breakfast time fascism by these fucking clowns. This is such an awful show that I genuinely fear for, both the intelligence and the mental sanity of the people who watch this on a regular basis. And because they have no critical reasoning skills, will agree with everything that these fucking clowns say. That's how bad this show is. And, well, before I end this video, I want to show this was a really short one, of another intervention from Liam in another trash radio show, which is Nick Ferrari. He's also very right-wing. And here is performative. Here's crocodile tears and performativeness in action.
That was Chris, who said also in the call that he effectively watched his mother draining away in front of his eyes because he was trapped a journey that should have taken an hour and a half.
So again, that story of the woman, clearly that's all that they've been recycling. There was no conversation at all about climate or even about insulating homes in the previous discussion. They always just focus on that. The same with any protest, like I said. If there is a shop vandalized, they will just go on and on and on about the vandalized shop and never actually deal with the issues surrounding the protests. That is the game that they play.
6 hours. That was through LBC's Andrew Pearce. Now, last week, spokesperson Liam Norton from Insulate Britain came on the show, and he's joining me again now. Mr. Norton, and there's every chance that Chris is listening. What would you say to him? Good morning.
Hi, Nick. Obviously, our hearts go out to Chris and his mother, and it's a tragic situation. And it's terrible, Nick, isn't it, that we're in this position where we have
it's not
to
terrible. I'd like it to be
campaign in this
actionable.
way.
I'd like it to be actionable. I would like to round your colleagues up and put them in jail. So I don't think it's terrible. I think it's actionable. And I still haven't really heard, apart from a rather lame apology. How can you justify your actions?
Lame apology. When has he... When Boris Johnson does something that is terrible, that leads to people dying, and he gives the lamest apology imaginable, and especially coming from a freaking sociopath like Boris Johnson, will Nick Ferrari question the genuineness of that apology? Of course he won't.
Well, it isn't about justification, Nick. It's about acknowledging the situation that we're in. And what we're saying to you, Nick, and I spoke to you last week, and I told you about what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. And you came back at me with a story about diesel cars, and it sounds like you can't emotionally connect with the truth.
Don't talk to me about emotionally. Don't lecture me about emotional connection, Mr. Norton. You've just heard a caller explain how he watched his mother effectively drain away in front of his house for 6 hours. Don't lecture me on emotional content, okay? Let's get that straight.
And I'm talking to you about the suffering of millions of people.
And I'm talking to you about the suffering of Chris's mother, which you brought about with your colleagues, okay?
Yeah.
Now, the fact that people are suffering is hideous, but that is on such a global scale. It impinges on the governments of China, India, the United Kingdom, Australia, everything. That woman effectively dying in front of her son's eyes is down to you and your colleagues. So when are you going to suddenly stop with it?
So because it's a global problem, everyone could just basically pass the hot potato among you. Like, it's not our fault if China doesn't do anything. And China's like, well, it's not our fault if the US doesn't do anything. The US is like, well, it's not our fault if the EU doesn't do anything. The EU is like, it's not our fault if India doesn't do anything. That's how everyone just, shifts the blame to every other country or group of countries. That's how it works. It's very easy to just point like, oh, you were responsible for this woman getting a stroke. That's real easy. But when it comes to assigning responsibility for the climate crisis, it's just, it's just so vague. We can't do this. It's fucking ridiculous.
These lame apologies and actually accept that this is not the way to protest, Mr. Norton.
It's awful, Nick, isn't it? That we have to.
I've had enough. I've had enough. It's not awful. What's awful is climate change, of course. What's awful is that someone has virtually died because of your actions. That's what's awful. Liam Norton is with Insulate Britain.
That's just, that's Oscar-worthy, but it's ultimately just performance. And he has had leading Tory politicians. He has questioned them on some of their most disgraceful actions, like not funding healthcare, things like that. And people die from these decisions. I'm sure that you can do your research as a journalist that you are and find out some tragic case from someone suffering from any Tory policy. Cuts to welfare, cuts to health services, whatever you want. You will find an endless amount of personal tragedies. Will he bring them up on his show? I don't think so. And if he does, and if the government spokesperson apologizes for them, will he make this little hissy fit that he just made here? Of course he won't. That's the double standard of how certain people are treated in the media while the powerful are not. And that is, I guess, a microcosm of the British media as a whole, which is pretty fucking terrible. If you think American media is bad, British media is, it's just as bad. And, well, yeah, that's kind of all I have to say. I leave it to you to decide whether these kind of protests are the right ones. Like I said, I don't think blocking motorways is the right way. But I am not against disruptive protests, including severely disruptive protests. But just the treatment that this guy has received, I mean, he's he's done all the rounds, so I think maybe he does like it. And he, I guess, recognizes the need that this brings the group visibility and brings an issue out into the light that I think a lot of people hadn't realized, like just how much of emissions or just how much wasteful spending is being done by not insulating homes. So hopefully this will bring the issue out into the light, and maybe at some point some government's going to do something. I doubt these Tories are. I doubt Boris Johnson gives a flying fuck, but maybe at some point. So thanks for watching this video. If you like, please give it a like, please give it a share, and most importantly, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.